I have had enough of this. I will not be treated this way any longer.
You will do as you are told, or you will leave this house
How
immediately.
dare you speak to me?
Sometimes the cruelest act is the kindest gift in disguise, and sometimes saving someone means breaking every rule you've ever believed in. What would you do if you witnessed abuse, only to discover that the monster was actually an angel? What if everything you thought you saw was a lie, but the truth was even more complicated than the lie itself? This is a story about perception, redemption, and the impossible choices we face when love collides with the law. By the end of this story, you'll question everything you thought you knew about right and wrong, justice and mercy, and what it truly means to save someone. This is the story of Desmond Larry and the moment that changed everything. Before we begin this incredible story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? Drop your location and time in the comments below. I love seeing our amazing global community. Are you watching this at midnight in Tokyo, during your lunch break in London, on your morning commute in New York? I want to know. And if this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's continue. Desmond Larry's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the black leather. The Manhattan skyline glittered in his rearview mirror, a testament to everything he'd built: the hotels, the real estate empire, the billions in assets that bore his name. But tonight, none of it mattered. Tonight, he'd left a boardroom full of investors waiting, because his gut told him something was wrong. The feeling had started during the quarterly earnings call, a nagging whisper in the back of his mind that grew louder with each passing minute. His mother, Helen, had sounded strange during their brief phone call that morning. Her voice had been tight, controlled, the same tone she'd used when he was a child and tried to hide his pain after falling off his bicycle. "I'm fine, Desmond," she'd said. "Don't fuss." But Helen Larry never told him not to fuss. She'd spent 30 years raising him alone after his father died, working 3 jobs to put him through school, scrubbing floors in office buildings after her day shifts at the hospital cafeteria, selling homemade pastries at the local farmer's market on weekends. She'd gone without new clothes for years so he could have textbooks. She'd walked miles in worn-out shoes so he could take the bus to his after-school tutoring program. She had never once complained, never once made him feel like a burden. Fussing over her was the least he could do now that he finally had the means to give her everything she deserved. The estate loomed ahead, all glass and steel and architectural magnificence. 5 acres of manicured gardens, an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the Hudson River, floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the last rays of sunset and turned them into liquid gold. Home, except it hadn't felt like home since Helen's stroke 6 months ago. Since the day he'd found her collapsed in the garden, her body twisted at an unnatural angle, her mouth working soundlessly, her eyes filled with a terror she tried desperately to hide from him. The doctors had been blunt. The stroke had been severe, left-side weakness possibly permanent. She'd need extensive rehabilitation, round-the-clock care, and even then they said she might never walk again. They used words like realistic expectations and quality-of-life adjustments and wheelchair accessibility. Desmond had listened to them with the same cold focus he brought to hostile business negotiations. Then he'd quietly made it clear that failure was not an option. He would pay whatever it took, hire whoever they needed, build whatever facilities were required. "You have to work, sweetheart," Helen had whispered from her hospital bed, her words slurred but determined. "Don't let me hold you back. I've already stolen enough of your life." The statement had nearly broken him, as if caring for the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him could ever be stealing. As if he hadn't spent the last 15 years buried in work precisely because he'd felt so guilty about how little time he spent with her. So he'd hired the best care money could buy. Sofia Martinez had come with impeccable references, 15 years of experience in elder care, glowing recommendations from families in Connecticut and New Jersey, a quiet competence that had immediately put him at ease. She was in her late 40s, with kind eyes and gentle hands, and the way she spoke to Helen, with respect, never condescension, had sealed the deal. Sophia had moved into the guest house, taken over Helen's care with gentle efficiency, and for the first time in months, Desmond had felt like he could breathe again. His mother was safe. She was comfortable. She was in good hands. He'd been wrong to trust so easily. The front door was unlocked. His heart rate spiked as he stepped into the marble foyer, the silence of the house pressing against his eardrums like cotton stuffed in his ears. No television sounds from the living room. No soft classical music Helen loved to play in the evenings, Chopin and Debussy, the same pieces she'd hummed while cooking dinner in their cramped one-bedroom apartment all those years ago. Just voices. Angry voices coming from upstairs. Desmond took the stairs 3 at a time, his $3,000 Italian shoes silent on the carpeted steps. His mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. Was Helen having another stroke? Had she fallen? Was Sophia? No, he wouldn't let himself think it. But the voices grew louder as he climbed, and there was no mistaking the sharp edge of command in Sophia's tone. The sounds were coming from his mother's suite, a sprawling set of rooms on the second floor that he'd had specially renovated with wide doorways, grab bars in the bathroom, and a hospital-grade bed that could be adjusted at the touch of a button. Sophia's voice carried through the door, sharp and commanding, and underneath it, his mother's labored breathing. Come on, Helen, you can do this, push harder. I can't, Sophia, please, I can't. Yes, you can, don't you dare give up on me now, push. There was pain in his mother's voice, raw, desperate pain, and something in Desmond's chest cracked wide open. The door was cracked open just an inch. Desmond's hand was already reaching for his phone, ready to dial 911, ready to get his mother away from this woman he'd let into their lives, when he looked through the gap. And froze. Sophia stood beside his mother's wheelchair, her face set in fierce concentration. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and sweat dampened her shirt. Helen sat in the wheelchair, her face flushed deep red with effort, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands gripping the armrests so hard her knuckles had gone white. And as Desmond watched in absolute horror, Sophia pulled her leg back and delivered what looked like a vicious kick directly to the footrest of the wheelchair, right near his mother's shin. Helen cried out. Again, Sophia commanded, her voice like steel. Don't give up now, you've come too far. Something inside Desmond shattered. He slammed the door open with enough force to crack it against the wall, the crash echoing through the room like a gunshot. Get away from her. Both women jumped. Sophia stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her own feet, her eyes going wide with shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. But it was his mother's face that stopped Desmond cold, because Helen wasn't crying from pain. She was laughing. Desmond, Helen gasped between sounds that were half sobs, half laughter. Oh, sweetheart, you're not supposed to be. What the hell is going on here? Desmond's voice came out as a roar. He moved towards Sophia, his body vibrating with rage. I saw you kick her. I'm calling the police right now. No, Helen's voice rang out, stronger than he'd heard it in months. Desmond, stop, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He had his phone out, was already pulling up the emergency number. This woman has been abusing you, and she's been helping me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Desmond stared at his mother. Helen was still in the wheelchair, but something about her posture was different. She wasn't slumped to one side the way she usually was. She was sitting straight, her shoulders back, and there was a light in her eyes he hadn't seen since before the stroke. What? He managed. Sophia had backed against the wall, her hands raised as if to ward off a blow. Mr. Larry, I can explain. Then explain. His voice was cold now, controlled, the voice he used in boardrooms when someone tried to cheat him. Explain why I just watched you assault my mother. It wasn't assault, Helen said quietly. Desmond, please, put the phone down and let us show you. Something in her tone made him pause. His mother had many qualities, but she'd never been a liar. Even when the truth hurt, even when a kind lie would have been easier, Helen Larry told the truth. Slowly, he lowered the phone. Sophia and Helen exchanged a long look. Then Sophia nodded and stepped forward, though she kept a careful distance from Desmond. Your mother is right, Sophia said softly. I have been helping her, just, not in the way you think, not in the way I was supposed to. What does that mean? It means, Helen said, and now Desmond could see tears running down her face again, but these were different tears. That Sophia is the reason I'm going to walk again. The world seemed to tilt sideways. The doctors said. The doctors gave up on me. Helen's voice was gentle but firm. They looked at my scans and my age and decided I was a lost cause, but Sophia didn't give up. She's been working with me, training me, pushing me, and Desmond, she took a shaky breath. I need you to watch something. Sophia moved to the wheelchair and positioned herself beside it. Helen, she said quietly, are you sure we were going to wait until? He needs to see. Helen gripped the armrests. Now. Desmond watched, his heart hammering, as Sophia placed her hands carefully on his mother's arms, not restraining, he realized, but supporting. Gidding. On 3, Sophia murmured. 1, 2, 3. And Helen Larry pushed herself out of the wheelchair. Not smoothly, not easily. Every muscle in her body trembled with effort, and she swayed dangerously, but Sophia's hands were there, steady and sure, providing just enough support to keep her balanced. But she was standing. His mother was standing. Oh my God, Desmond whispered. Watch, Helen said through gritted teeth. Then she lifted her left foot, the one the doctors said would never move properly again, and took a step forward. Then another. Small, shuffling steps, her body shaking, sweat breaking out on her forehead, but steps. 5 steps, that's all she managed before her legs gave out, and Sophia carefully guided her back into the wheelchair, but it was enough. Desmond realized he was crying. I don't understand, he said hoarsely. How is this possible? Sophia sank into a chair, looking suddenly exhausted. Helen was breathing hard, but there was triumph written across her face. Tell him, Helen said, he deserves to know the truth, all of it. Sophia looked at Desmond for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath. My name is Sophia Martinez, she began, but that's not the whole truth. My full name is Dr. Sophia Elena Martinez. I used to be a licensed physical therapist with a specialty in stroke rehabilitation and neurological recovery. I worked at St. Catherine's Rehabilitation Center in Hartford for 12 years. I had a 93% success rate with patients the medical establishment had written off. I was good at my job, Mr. Larry, really good. Used to be, Desmond asked quietly. 3 years ago, I witnessed systemic abuse at St. Catherine's, patients being neglected, therapy sessions being cut short or skipped entirely while families were still charged full price, medications being administered incorrectly. I tried to report it through the proper channels. When that didn't work, I went to the state licensing board. When they buried my complaint, I went to the media. Desmond felt a chill run down his spine. What happened? St. Catherine's was owned by a very wealthy, very well-connected family. They sued me for defamation, claimed I'd fabricated everything. By the time the truth came out, by the time an independent investigation proved I'd been right about everything, I'd lost my license, my savings, and my reputation. The technical reason given was inappropriate disclosure of patient information, even though I'd done everything I could to protect patient privacy. But the real reason, she smiled bitterly. I made powerful people look bad. That's insane, Desmond said. You were a whistleblower, you should have been protected. Should have been, wasn't. Sophia leaned forward, her eyes intense. I tried to get my license reinstated, spent 2 years and every penny I had left on lawyers, but the system is designed to protect itself, not people like me, so I couldn't practice anymore, couldn't work in hospitals or rehab centers, couldn't legally call myself a physical therapist. But you still had the knowledge, Helen said softly, the skills. And people still needed help, Sophia continued. So I started working as a caregiver, just basic care, nothing that required a license, helping people bathe, dress, take their medications. But when I'd see someone struggling with mobility issues, someone the doctors had given up on, she looked at Helen, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. So you helped them anyway, Desmond said slowly. Without a license, illegally. Yes, Sophia met his eyes without flinching. I helped them. I never charged extra, never advertised, never promised anything. But I used every technique I'd learned, every strategy I'd developed to give people a chance the medical system said they didn't have. And when you came here, Desmond looked at his mother. I saw the same thing I always see, Sophia said. A strong person being told she was weak, a fighter being told to give up. Your mother had only been given the bare minimum of therapy, a few weeks of basic exercises, then they sent her home with the wheelchair and told her to adjust. It made me furious. So Sophia asked me if I wanted to really work. Helen picked up the story. Not just sit in this chair and fade away, but work, train like an athlete, push myself past the pain. And I said yes. We started slow, Sophia said. Gentle stretches, range of motion exercises. Then we built up, every day a little more. And Helen, your mother is one of the strongest people I've ever met. She never quit, not even on the days when the pain made her cry. Not even when she fell and we had to start over. She kept fighting. Why didn't you tell me? Desmond asked, looking at his mother. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Because I was afraid that if you knew you'd make Sophia stop. The legal risks, the liability. I know how your mind works, sweetheart. You'd want to protect me, protect yourself, protect the family name. And I understood that. But I also knew that if we stopped, I'd lose my one chance to walk again. And that kick I saw, Desmond asked. Resistance training, Sophia explained. I was providing resistance against your mother's push. It's a specialized technique to rebuild neural pathways and strengthen weakened muscles. I wasn't kicking her, I was giving her something to push against, building her strength back, one painful repetition at a time. Desmond sank into a chair, his mind reeling. Everything he thought he'd seen, everything he'd believed in that moment of horror, all of it had been wrong. Not a crime, but a miracle in progress. I owe you an apology, he said to Sophia. I thought. You thought you saw someone hurting your mother, Sophia said gently. Any good son would have reacted the same way. You don't need to apologize for loving her. But now you know, Helen said, and her voice was suddenly anxious. You know what Sophia's been doing. You know she doesn't have a license. You know she's been breaking the law, Desmond finished, to help you walk again. The room fell silent. Desmond Larry had built his empire on rules. Contracts were sacred. Laws were absolute. He'd made his fortune by doing everything by the book, by maintaining a reputation for integrity that made people trust him with billions of dollars. Cut corners, bend rules, and the whole structure collapsed. But as he looked at his mother, really looked at her, he saw something the doctors hadn't seen, not just recovering mobility, but recovering herself. The woman who'd fought for him was learning to fight for herself again. And Sophia, this woman who'd lost everything for telling the truth, was still using her gifts to help people even when helping came with tremendous personal risk. What do you want to do? Helen asked quietly. I'll understand if you feel like you have to report this. I know what it could mean for you, for your business. I know people depend on your reputation. Desmond thought about the board meeting he'd walked out of, the investors who measured everything in quarterly returns and risk assessments, the lawyers who'd tell him he was exposing himself to massive liability, the headline, Billionaire harbors unlicensed therapist. Then he thought about his mother standing on her own feet for the first time in 6 months. I'm not going to report anything, he said finally. Sophia's breath caught. Mr. Larry. But he continued, we're going to do this differently. Sophia, how many other people like you are out there? Physical therapists who lost their licenses for reasons that had nothing to do with their competence. I don't know, dozens, maybe more. And how many patients are being told to give up when they could still recover? Thousands, Sophia said softly. Tens of thousands. Insurance companies won't pay for extended therapy. Medicare cuts people off after a few weeks. And the people who could really help, people like me, can't practice because one mistake, one act of courage, and you're out forever. Desmond pulled out his phone, but this time, he wasn't calling the police. He was calling his attorney. David, it's Desmond. I need you to research something for me. Whistleblower protection laws, medical licensing appeals, and rehabilitation therapy regulations. Everything you can find, and I need it by tomorrow morning." He ended the call and looked at the two women watching him. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "Sophia, we're going to fight to get your license back. We're going to hire the best attorneys in the country. We're going to go after St. Catherine's and everyone who buried your complaint. And we're not going to stop until your name is cleared." "That could take years," Sophia whispered, "and cost." "I have years and I have money. What I don't have is a reason to keep it if I can't use it to fix things that are broken." He turned to his mother. "Mom, you're going to keep working with Sophia every day. And when you walk again, we're going to document everything. Every technique, every exercise, every small victory. We're going to show the world what's possible when someone refuses to give up." "Desmond," Helen's voice broke. "And then," Desmond continued, his voice growing stronger, "we're going to start a foundation. A rehabilitation center staffed by therapists like Sophia, people who have been punished for doing the right thing. We'll pay them properly, protect them legally, and give them the resources to help people the system has abandoned. We're going to change the entire broken structure." Sophia was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do all this?" Desmond looked at his mother, this woman who'd worked 3 jobs to give him a future, who'd never quit even when quitting would have been easier, who was still fighting now at 72 years old because she refused to be defeated. "Because Sophia," he said quietly, "you gave my mother back to me. The least I can do is give you back your ability to help others." 6 months later, the Larry Rehabilitation Foundation opened its doors in a gleaming building in Westchester County. Dr. Sophia Martinez, license reinstated after a very public legal battle that exposed corruption in the medical licensing system, served as director of neurological recovery programs. The foundation's first patient to walk through the door on her own 2 feet. With only a cane for balance. Helen Larry. The press conference made national news, not because a billionaire had started another charity that happened every day, but because Desmond Larry stood in front of cameras and told the truth about what he'd almost done, about the judgment he'd almost made, about how close he'd come to destroying the woman who'd saved his mother. "I thought I saw abuse," he said, his mother standing proudly beside him, "but I was the one who was blind. I was so focused on rules and liability and protection that I almost missed the miracle happening in my own home. I almost punished the hero and let the real criminals, the systems that silence whistleblowers and abandon patients, continue unchallenged. This foundation exists because one woman had the courage to break rules that were wrong," he continued. "Because my mother had the courage to keep fighting, and because I finally learned that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that looks wrong from the outside." Within a year, the foundation had helped 57 patients regain mobility they'd been told was lost forever. Within 2 years, they'd trained 43 therapists who'd lost their licenses unfairly and helped them re-enter the field. Within 5 years, they'd changed regulations in 18 states. And every morning, Desmond Larry walked into the building and saw his mother leading a therapy session, moving slowly but steadily between patients, offering encouragement and hope. Because sometimes the cruelest act is the kindest gift in disguise. And sometimes being saved means first saving others. So that's the story. What did you think? Have you ever misjudged a situation only to find out the truth was completely different? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. And remember to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Are you in Lagos watching this at 3 a.m., in Sydney during your morning coffee, in Sao Paulo on your lunch break? Drop your location below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. Share this with someone who needs to hear that giving up is never the only option, that miracles happen when we refuse to quit, and that sometimes the heroes in our lives are the ones we almost mistake for villains. Until next time, remember, don't judge what you don't understand. Ask questions, seek truth, and never ever give up on the people you love. See you in the next story.